Subverse, the much-anticipated erotic space adventure game, just launched into early access yesterday. And since I, of course, was one of the earliest and most vociferous proponents of just such a game, particularly one created by Studio FOW, we are, of course, today going to have a look at the early access version of the game. Now, first and foremost, allow me to point out that what you will be seeing here is a bit of clipped-out, pre-selected footage, because, well, there are several parts of this game that is not YouTube friendly, so instead of playing the game live in front of you and risking the odd stray nipple here and there, I'll be choosing my clips with a little bit more care than normal. And that fact alone already gives a bit of an indication as to what the game is going to be about now, doesn't it? Subverse is a space game with turn-based tactical combat, shoot-'em-up elements, and a bit of RPG thrown into the mix, along with erotica. Or actually, let's be a little bit more blunt about it here. This is a porn game, first and foremost, along with some tactical turn-based elements, some shoot-'em-up gameplay, and the odd RPG element. Yes, I think putting the feature list in that order is a bit more correct and gives you a clearer view of what you're in for here, though do not make the mistake of hearing porn game and thinking that it's one of those cheap knockoff-looking 3D ones you see scattered across the internet that all universally appear as if they could have been produced on Newgrounds back in the early 90s. Oh, no. This is quite the different beast indeed. Not only does it have some pretty damn amazing presentation and production quality, as you'll be seeing from some of the footage playing in the background right here, because again, Studio FOV are not by any stretch of the imagination newcomers to this particular field of artistic pursuit. Oh, no. And the quality of the more spicy scenes absolutely live up to the general presentation. Although be forewarned, again, this is an early access version, of course, and there are only, I believe, 2 unlockable characters at the moment. The first 6 chapters consisting of Act 1, right about ballpark 5 to 7 or so hours of gameplay right now, depending upon how much you want to get into the side quests, etc., and only 2 unlockable characters with about 6 to 8 wrestling scenes per character. Oh, and of course there's Demi as well, your ship's mainframe, so 3 characters in total. A little bit of an anemic start, I gotta say. I'm not entirely convinced that early access was the right way to go with this game. With an early access period of about 12 or so months, that's a lot of drip feeding of content right there, in my opinion. Though, we'll see about how their release schedule shapes up. If they are able to provide a nice big update relatively frequently, and who knows, the episodic approach might be a very good idea. Now, let us also talk a little bit more about expectations here, shall we? Because it ain't just the etchy-sketchy scenes. The game is very, how do I put it? Talkative. Chatty, yes, these are the terms I shall use. There is a lot of dialogue in the game, and it is very well voice acted, and pretty damn well written as well. Normally, I'm the kind of guy who has a very specific sense of humor, often a little bit more darkish and elitish, shows like Titus or Blackadder, that kind of stuff. I don't find most generalized humor things funny, honestly, but the game got more than a few chuckles out of me. In fact, I almost felt it was a little bit refreshing, frankly, to have this kind of relatively crude humor presented quite openly in a video game format. I don't know. Gaming has just felt like such a oddly stiff form of entertainment now for a long time. And it didn't used to be this way, God no. I mean, I still remember playing a certain Leisure Suite Larry back in the day. And from what I've seen of Subverse so far, I'd probably say that Subverse is the superior video game out of the two. But of course, humor is very, very subjective. If your leans more towards the crude direction of, sexual innuendos, etc., you will be well pleased by this game, and no doubt about it. Particularly, again, because, I can't stress it enough, the voice acting talent. I kind of feel like the game labors under the tag of porn game, honestly, a little bit too much. This was also something I was talking about when the game was first announced, that I kind of wanted a porn game that was more than just a porn game. Something with a bit of gameplay, some character interaction, some world building, some characters you were actually interested in learning more about. And from what I've been able to see so far, Subverse has a lot of world building, a lot of it. And the characters too have been quite charming as well. It helps also that you can bring them into battle, both in the turn-based tactical mode by deploying the waifu directly on the board and having them fight, and also in the shoot-'em-up mode by having them be all chatty alongside you and granting your ship, the Phoenix, a special ability. A sniper shot for the Doctor waifu, and a ginormous space shotgun for the red-skinned demon woman. I'll be using descriptive terms here, by the way, because I will also, unfortunately, be muting the audio, because, YouTube's filter when it comes to wording these days is, well, it's interesting. I would like to remind YouTube as a platform, by the way, that it's perfectly fine with having naked yoga on its site, but even the slightest mention of a phallic object, that's hopefully an obscure enough term for the bots, well, that'll get you cracked down upon real nice and quick, so I hope you'll excuse the extra caution. From what I've seen of the story so far, it really does seem pretty goddamn serviceable. The story is relatively simplistic because, well, it is a humorous game. This is a world of cuckenings and gay robots, along with mind-breakingly powerful monster alien squid people, which have immortal empresses that rule over the galaxy. The game does not take itself overly seriously, but it takes itself just seriously enough to establish its own internal rules and characters. There's some rather flavorful characters as well that get really interesting, and I imagine will be very memorable too. I do have one complaint though, and that is the pacing. Subverse can, as I mentioned, be a remarkably wordy game, and I feel like the balance between action and gameplay and talking is a little bit off. They could be mixed and mashed up together a little bit more, since right now it feels like you are either in a large block of dialogue being presented via little sequences like what you can see over here, or you're in combat. And the two have a problem really flowing well together at the moment, leading me to kind of sit there feeling like, okay, I've been doing a little bit too much shmup and tactical turn-based combat now. I'd like some more story. And simultaneously, I'll be sitting through some lengthy exposition sequences and thinking to myself, man, that skip button, it's starting to look mighty tempting right about now. So a little bit more work on the pacing there would be nice. The skip option, not the full skip option, but the skip individual dialogue one, for example, I'd love it if that could be a little bit quicker and presumably, preferably in fact, also combined with the autoplay option. So if I come to a sequence where I'm like, okay, I'm not really interested in what they're saying right now because I'm reading faster than they're speaking, I press spacebar, I skip on to the next thing without interrupting autoplay. As right now, it's autoplay or manual skip only. A combination of the two would be really nice. And that brings us naturally on to the gameplay. As I have already mentioned, there are two main gameplay types right now. The tactical turn-based combat, where you have a grid upon which you fight, where you pick one of your waifus to come down with you as a bit of a hero unit, shall we say. The hero units have their own abilities and also their own ultimates that they can use, and they are suitable for different things. A sniper might be better against certain opponents, whereas the close-in combat prowess of Demon Lady might be better against certain others, and mildly catastrophic against the F-word bots, because they've got suicide bombers, and yeah, a woman who fights with a sword might not be ideally suited to dealing with that kind of opposition. And then you have your mantics. These are bred little monstrosities that you can create aboard your ship that can take on a wide variety of different tasks depending upon the mantics you want to use. At the moment, there are 4 of them. A big, fat melee bruiser, a ranged acid goblet spitting little dog thing, and a literal dog thing that runs around launching energy attacks. And then you have Napoleon, who is a fan of baguettes apparently, and uses psychic attacks from range. These mantics, along with your waifus, will also level up and eventually unlock new abilities, and of course, as mentioned, you will also unlock new mantics over the course of the gameplay as well. This is good because it will give you some variety, and I do think the game needs it. I believe there are 3 main enemy types at the moment, and they do fight fairly differently, like the aforementioned F-bots. God, I hate YouTube's modern-day speech censorship. They are quite melee heavy, but also with suiciders. You've got another faction that's a little bit of a mix between the both all-arounders, and you've got some ranged fighters with little artillery bots as well. And this will, presumably, along with an increasing difficulty curve, influence what units you would like to bring into specific scenarios. They also have a health bar system where they can have health, of course, then armor and shields too. If you want to deal with armor, you need an energy attack. If you want to deal with shields, you need a physical attack. So if you're up against a particular species that have a lot of the one thing, you want to bring the natural counter to that. Simultaneously, if they bring a lot of suicide bots, you probably don't want to bring the woman with the sword. I do wonder, however, how long this will remain interesting, because the tactical turn-based combat is relatively simplistic, because right now, I don't believe there is any plan to add in more than 4 units, and you are then fighting against 3 waves of spawning enemies, which, by the way, can spawn and act on the same turn, which is bullshit, and I don't like it in the slightest, because you got no idea what's coming, and you got no idea to react to it either. Been annoying that. I have a hard time imagining that system is going to be complex and interesting enough to keep me interested for 30 odd hours of gameplay, bearing in mind that there's of course going to be a lot of dialogue in there as well, but even for like 5 or 6 hours, I think I'll grow relatively tired of it. Then we move on to the shoot-'em-up gameplay, where you fly around in your ship, the Phoenix. Now, right off the bat, I just gotta say, this is probably the second shoot-'em-up game I have ever played in my entire life, and the first one was on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, so, I don't really have much of an expert opinion here, frankly. But from what I played, at least, would I prefer the shoot-'em-up gameplay to the turn-based tactical combat? Both yes and no. I feel like the shmup gameplay is of a much higher quality overall than the tactical turn-based combat. It's faster paced, it's nice, it's visual, and the backgrounds are incomparable. I mean, the tactical turn-based combat has some decent looking backgrounds, but compared to the absolutely epic looking space backgrounds and the intricacies of the map as well, filled with projectiles, enemy ships, and asteroids, oh yeah, hands down, the shoot-'em-up mode is the better mode, and yet, honestly, I'm kind of torn between the two. But again, bearing in mind, I am most assuredly a strategy kind of guy, so that probably influences my wavering on that particular front. And it certainly wasn't too easy either. I don't think I lost a tactical turn-based strategy mission, but I did die a couple of times on the shoot-'em-up gameplay. Again, bearing in mind, I got no idea what's easy or hard in games like that, but I felt like it was a decent challenge, frankly. I died occasionally, but I never got to the point where I was like, yeah, this is just frustrating. Though I did experience one bug. I'll demonstrate it to you right here, where you can see that the game intermittently freezes. Now, this isn't lag, it's far too measured for that, like it seems to occur at fixed intervals, and the game itself actually seems to be playing in the background whilst my screen is frozen, because projectiles will move and your ship will move as well, which is non-ideal in a fast-paced shoot-'em-up battle, as you can probably imagine. That was the only bug I've encountered so far though, but, should probably mention it. I do like the idea of the special powers, though again, I'm kind of wondering, like, how long will this really remain fresh and interesting? Bearing in mind, of course, that this is only early gameplay, and I haven't encountered any of the variations of the enemies yet either, the differently colored ones, which might have different abilities, and of course, just larger health bars. And also, the tactical turn-based boss battle was not particularly interesting either, because, frankly, that side of the game is not all that good. But the boss battles in the shmup so far have been quite interesting. In one case, you have to protect a station against waves of incoming attacks, and then occasionally move away from the station to allow it to deploy an EMP burst. That was quite interesting and relatively challenging as well. In the other one, you have to chase after a large enemy boss ship whilst asteroids come flying at you and enemies spawn behind you as well, so you have to dodge the asteroids, the boss ship's projectiles, and the ships that are coming after you simultaneously. Now that was quite hectic and a refreshing break from the otherwise relatively samey shoot-'em-up style gameplay. I really do think that a little bit more in the way of special abilities could be nice. Currently, you can do a sprint ability where you move faster but you can't fire your weapons. You can do a charge where you can kill smaller opponents. You've got your basic shoot, and then you've got your special ability depending upon which waifu you currently have equipped. A little bit more could be nice. Maybe some abilities to call in some stuff. The ability to use two waifus with one in a support role or buffing role, for example. Stuff like that to make it a little bit more interesting. Because again, if there really is 30 odd hours of gameplay to fill, then these two game modes are gonna have to carry a lot of that time, and the tactical turn-based in particular I don't think is ready for that. The shmup, depending upon how the enemies evolve, it could be and it couldn't be. I definitely see myself tiring of the tactical turn-based sooner than the shoot-'em-up combat, but again, that might simply just be a sense of novelty in my regard as well, so, grain of salt. With that, shall we now move on to some conclusions then? At the moment, it is, of course, again, as mentioned, in early access, and there's not all that much content right now, honestly. About 5 or 7 or so hours isn't a huge amount, certainly. 2 unlockable characters, a bunch of little shoot-'em-up missions, tactical turn-based combat, 4 bosses, I think, circa-ish, and a lot of the features on the ship, too, are currently unavailable. For example, you can't dress up your waifus in, as they mentioned it, erotic yet extremely impractical outfit, which is truly tragic, I gotta say. You also don't have access to all that many perverted wrestling scenes either, and that is, of course, a bit of a main draw of the game. On the other hand, though, considering again the limitations of the gameplay that I've talked about already, and, I mean, hell, on the one hand, I'm kind of like, well, the gameplay is mediocre to alright, but at the same time, I'm like, what do I expect out of a porn game? Well, kind of the point of Subverse is I think that it is more than just a porn game, so we should also expect a little bit more of it, and in a way, the episodic structure might actually serve the game better in that regard. As you'll play it for, again, 4 to 7 odd or so hours, then you'll put it down for a few months, pick it back up again when a story element is added, and play it for another 4 to 7 hours, kind of resetting your ability to enjoy the tactical turn-based combat and the shoot-'em-up gameplay. Might actually turn out to be a relatively savvy business move. But you should certainly not feel compelled to rush out and purchase the game immediately, in my opinion, as again, it is a little feature threadbare right now. You can probably get at least 1 or 2 right, left-handed exercises out of it. Sure, but it is far from feature complete, though it does show great promise. Again, what I was really looking forward to in Subverse was, again, a bit more than just a porn game. Something with a story, and most importantly, something with interesting characters. And in that regard, Subverse absolutely does deliver. They are colorful, they are interesting, they are also very unique, diverse, if you would allow me to use that these days rather heavily laden word as well. And again, the voice acting, I gotta repeat it, it really is genuinely excellent. The main weak point, again, then, being the gameplay. The tactical turn-based combat in particular, I think it could benefit considerably of, well, frankly, just more units, more abilities beyond move and attack, and then one ultimate ability. You know, give 2 or 3 some abilities to ensnare, some stun, some AoE attacks, you know, stuff like that to spice it up a little bit. When it's a shoot-'em-up gameplay, again, I actually thought it was kind of fun, though it did get a little bit samey after a while, but again, I'm hardly no expert on that. All in all, Subverse has a pretty damn good start here. It is absolutely no train wreck, which, thank God for that. The only real question I believe at the moment is whether or not the game will have the longevity to satisfactorily fill the 30-odd hours. But again, though, the main charm of the game is going to be the wrestling and the characters, in my opinion, and with only 2 of them and a handful of scenes available at the moment, I feel like I can't quite pass judgment on that either. Anywho, somewhat wishy-washy, I know, but Subverse is looking damned good, and I have very high hopes for its continued development. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.